Hi everybody, sorry for the delay. We had a bit of a technical problem, but hopefully we'll be able to make good time as we proceed. I'm going to talk today about developing full stack applications. This is going to be mainly a live coding session, so don't grow tired of the 2 slides ahead. And before I start, a little bit about me. I'm a founder and a CEO. By the end of the day, I'm always a developer. I like to write code every day. I've worked on hundreds of enterprise applications. I helped modernize hundreds of enterprise applications, line of business application, banking, insurance, finance, logistics, all had hundreds, sometimes even thousands of tables and thousands of forms. And you kind of see a pattern go through this application, and we're going to talk about it a bit today. As a developer, I am lazy. I don't like to write a lot of code. I want as least code as I can and to get things done. I'm also very error prone, which means I do spelling mistakes, I do typing mistakes, any mistake you can think of, I can do it. And that's why I like to have toolings that helps me work around that. And I'm a deployment enthusiast, which means I want to deploy daily as much as I can. So when I talk about the kind of applications that I'm writing, the line of business application, I would usually go for an architecture of a single page application because I don't really care about SEOs. I more care about a rich user experience on the front end, grids, charts, whatever. I like to use TypeScript end to end. So Node.js on the back end and whatever on the front end. I will usually start with a monolith repo because splitting it up is just an unnecessary complication. Only when I grow to a big enough size, I'll start considering that, but start with a monolith. And in most cases, I'll use a relational database because it just gets things done. Now, when we come to look at a basic CRUD application, create, read, update, delete, here's what we need to have. We need to have a backend, and we need to have a front end. On the backend, we need model types, and we need model types on the front end. We need API routes on the backend, put, post, delete, and some code that consumes that, Axios, fetch, whatever. We need data validation for our API and data validation on the front end to give a good user experience. We need access control on the backend to control who can use our API, and some authorization queues on the front end for the users. And then we need ORM, SQL, paging, sorting, filtering, real-time routes and components. That's it. That's what you need to do to write a CRUD application these days, which I think it's horrifying. So if we look at this, the first layer, okay, this is unnecessarily repetitive code. It's like a socket and a plug. It's a mirror image of one another. And I get this wrong. I always fix one and not consistently fix the other. So this is one place where I usually fail. Another part is the ORM, SQLs, paging, whatever. It's repetitive boilerplate code that you copy again and again with the errors, with the vulnerabilities, and I really don't like boilerplate code. Now, modern full-stack frameworks such as TRPC and Next.js and Remix, Redwood, T3, all of these started to address this problem. So they give you some model type sharing and they give you some API route sharing, but I don't think that's enough. In the way I look at things, I think that all of this is a reflection of a business entity. It can be a customer, it can be an order, and all of these are just different representation of that entity. And we write a lot of code just to show that logical representation. So I want to live in a world when I have an entity, a single source of truth, and all of this is derived from that. So I started with the idea around 6 years ago, wrote a package called Remalt, and I'm going to show it to you today. It's been used in production for a while now, and let's see what we can do with it. So what we are going to do now is we're going to take a front-end React app and turn it into a full-stack app with everything that I've shown over there with 15, 18 minutes. Let's see if we can do it. So yeah, now I restarted my computer, so many things won't work, but let's give it a chance. I'm going to start by running npm run dev. I'm using Vite. How many of you know Vite? Cool. So Vite is like a development server that gives you hot reload and bundling, really fun. Replaces Webpack in a great way. And this is our React app. Okay, a simple to-do app. I have tasks, I can check them, I can delete tasks, I can add tasks, and set them all as completed and uncompleted. Let's go ahead and review the code. So basic React app, we can see over here that we have the tasks, the state. We start with a front-end state, later we'll refactor that, of course, and that represents the stacks that I have in my UI. We have here the code to add a new task that serves this form over here. And set all completed works with these 2 buttons. Here's the form. Here's the list of tasks with set completed, deleted, and some HTML. Cool. Okay. And we use the task type to describe our task. A task has an ID, a title, indication if it was completed, and indication when it was created. So if we want to turn this front-end app into a full-stack app, the first thing that we need to do is add a backend. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add backend index.ts. And here I'm going to say export const app express. Normal express app. Let's add a route so we can see that it all works. Hello, we are developers. Cool. Now I want to use Vite also to hot reload my Node.js backend, and you can do that. So I'm going to head over to the Vite config. I'm going to import a plugin. And I'm going to tell it to run my source backend. So now if I go over here, I'll go slash hi, and we get hello one. So we have a backend working, and we can start doing what we plan to do. So the first thing I want to look at is the task type. I think it represents my single source of truth, and I want to share it between the front end and the backend. So to do that, I'll start by adding a new folder, shared, and I'm going to drag and drop the task type to the shared folder. Okay, see that all still works. Cool. Now, I want my entire code. Why does it think that it needs to think about something? Okay, so I want this to be the single source of truth of pretty much everything that I do. And I'm going to add to it a decorator. And I'm going to ask it to allow all CRUD operations. Later, we'll restrict that a little bit. Next, I'll tell it that the ID is a CUID, the title is a string, the completed is a Boolean, and the created at is surprisingly enough created at. So I've defined the entity, and I'll head back to our server, and I'll import remult express, which is the adapter for express, and define it, saying const API, remult express, and then I'm going to give it the entities array with the task in it. Okay, and last, I'll ask express to use my API. So as soon as I do that, I get a fully working API. I can go ahead and send a GET request, and I get an empty array. I can change it to a POST request, add a task, and it will be posted to my database. We can see that the ID was generated by the server. We can see the created at was generated by the server. So just by defining these few decorators, we now have a backend working. And as for a database, we use, when we start, a basic JSON database that makes life very easy to start developing. Later in the presentation, we'll graduate to a real database. So I want to have a few more tasks. So I'm going to go and steal for my UI. I'll grab these tasks. So now the UI doesn't have them anymore, and I'm going to post them to my API endpoint. Cool. And so we can view again our test database, and now we see all the tasks in our database. Now let's go ahead and reuse the same type in our front end. So I'm going to switch over to our app TSX, and I'm going to define here task repo, which is a remult repo task. And that would return to me a repository of type tasks that I can use to interact with my task on the backend and on the front end. So to use it, I'm going to add a use effect that runs when the component mounts. And I'll say task repo, find, then set tasks. And as soon as I do that, I got all the tasks on the UI from the backend. Let's check out the network tab. And we can see that it's a standard REST API call. Okay, now by default, find gets all the tasks, but that doesn't really make sense anymore. So we can add limit to limit the number of rows. We can add page to limit the page. Okay, and it's all just standard REST API calls. Okay, very clear, very concise standard REST API calls. I can add order by, created at, descending, so I'll get server-side sorting. And I can also do ascending. I can do where, and filter on the server for completed true or false. And it all works. And I can even put a string here and get typing error. So I'm reusing the same types that serves the backend also on the front end to get type checks, end-to-end type checks. So just with a few decorators, we get database, API, fully functional query language. Let's proceed to CRUD. And cool. So this is the code that adds a new task. And to insert it to our database, I'll say await task repo insert. And I don't need this anymore because those are generated by the backend. To save changes to a task, all I need to do is await task repo save. And now I can save the changes. And to delete a task, await task repo delete. So just by setting these 3 lines of code, I get full CRUD capability. I can add a new task. I can go ahead and check the tasks. And you can see that we have a post call to add and a put call to update. And of course, I can delete, and we'll get a delete call to delete. And one of the fun parts of using our JSON database is I can actually see it update in real time, which is, I think, cool. Okay, so we've done setup, entities, paging, and CRUD. At this point in time, our user loved our application so much that they gave it to another user. And that other user started updating the data and did all of this stuff. And user number 1 did not see that. User number 1 needs to refresh in order to see that. And my users at least, prefer not to. So we need some kind of live query capabilities. Let me show you how we can do it with Remalt. So over here in the use effect, instead of using find, I'm going to use live query. Instead of doing then, I'm going to use subscribe. And subscribe gets an info object that I can use to apply changes. I'll also return the result here, so it will unsubscribe when the component unmounts. So now, if user number 2 drags and drops it here and make changes, we can see that in real time. Okay, cool. The next topic I want to talk about is validation. That's one of those things that I always get wrong. I validate it on the API and forget to validate it on the front end, or God forbid, the other way around. I create a validation on the HTML and don't validate the API. This is, again, one of those things that I want to have in a single source of truth, so I will get it right. So let's head over to our task, aka single source of truth, and add validation code. I can do a custom validation like task title length less than 3, so error to short. And then if I try to add an empty task, I'll get the error. Now, mind the network tab, you can see that no network calls are being made. This code executes on the front end and serves as front-end validation. Now let's try to bypass that and head over to our request. I'll try to send an empty task. The same code runs to validate my API. So I get consistent validation on the front end and the back end. And we also return a very structured error, so you can put the nice error next to the nice input and give a good user experience. Great, so validation is done. The next request for my users is, okay, we're too lazy to set it one at a time. Please give us a button to set them all with a single click. And that's usually the way I work. My users give me an explanation of why they need on the UI. So I start by doing that. I'll head over to the set all completed method. And I'll say here for off await task repo find, because maybe there are more tasks than we can see on the screen. And then I'll do await task repo save task and completed. And as soon as I do that, if I click it, it sets them all. So I'm happy, my user is happy, but my boss not so much. Because my boss looks at the network tab here and said, are you crazy? Can you see how many calls you make with each and every one of these updates? This would never scale. If we have 10,000 tasks, it will fail. And I said, okay, no problem. I'm using Remalt. I can just move this to the backend. So let me show you how I do that. I'm going to go to the shared folder, and I'm going to define a tasks controller. Tasks controller. And then I'm going to head over here and copy the set all completed method. And I'm going to make it static. And I'm going to decorate it with the backend method decorator. Now, the backend method decorator tells Remalt, backend method, yes, static. Good. The backend method decorator tells Remalt that if you happen to come by this code in the front end, don't run it on the front end. Make an API call to the backend and run it over there. And the next thing I need to define here is a task repo, just like before. And we use the same syntax, but this time, if previously the repository made HTTP calls to the backend, when I use the repository on the backend, it will make calls to the database, SQLs or Mongo or whatever I want over there. Next, I'll register it on my API. And on the front end, I'll adjust the code to call my tasks controller, set completed, completed. And let's check out what happens. I get one call to the backend, and everything works. So by using the same abstraction on the front end and the backend, I can get code portability between the front end and the backend. And I don't need to change mental state when I'm developing the front end and switching to the backend and switching back. Since it's the same API, my developer experience is a lot stronger. And of course, I also get end-to-end typing. So if by any chance I'll send a string here, I'll get a type error check. Cool. So next we need to do database. So far we've played with JSON, which was fun. Let's graduate to a real database. So I'm going to head over here, and I'm going to import remalt Postgres, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to say that the data provider is a Postgres data provider with this connection string. And now I have an empty list of tasks because there's no tasks in my Postgres database. And we can see over here, there's an option to automatically create the table. So it does that for me. Of course, it's an option, so anyone who doesn't like automatic creation can disable it. I don't know why, but you can. And let's head over to our request and get back to our nice array, send it in, and now we have data in our Postgres. So that's what it took me to move from a JSON database to a Postgres database. And I actually used that a lot in development. I created a project with a JSON database so I can share quickly and deploy quickly, and many developers can work on. And in production, it scales up to Postgres just with a simple if. Okay. Wait. The next or last important topic I think about a CRUD application is authentication and authorization. Obviously, not anyone can see the data, but it's also something that I want to define in my single source of truth. So if, for example, I want to say that only authenticated users can see the data, all I'll do is here allow authenticated. And I cannot see the data anymore because I'm not authenticated. Now, authentication is an external concern to Remalt. You can use whatever you like. Next auth, passport, I don't know, anything. But for this demo, I'm going to use cookie session just because it's cool and easy. So here we add cookie session. Let's review. This is the setup for cookie session. This is a static list of users. Now, of course, in real life, you're going to use a database or some kind of external identity provider. But for this demo, this will do. And here I've used a post request to do sign-in. Now, you may ask, why did I use an express route instead of using a backend method? And of course, I could use a backend method, and it would be better to use a backend method. But I want to do this to show you that you can fit Remalt in your existing stack. You don't have to go all in on Remalt. It can work side by side with everything that you do today. So you can just add it to get the ease of use in new code while still using the routes that you used before. And the only thing I need to tell Remalt is how it can extract the user from the request. This is how. Great. So on the front end, I'm going to go to the main TSX and replace app with auth. And let's review auth. Very simple sign-in component with a sign-in method that does a fetch call to our API. Okay. Again, showing that it can run side by side with whatever it is you're doing today. So I'll sign in as Steve, and now I can see the data. Okay. Now let's take it one step further. Obviously, not everyone can do everything. There are roles in the world. There are people who are more responsible and people who are less. So we can say, for example, that delete is not allowed, and that insert is only allowed if you're an admin. And as soon as I set that role in my single source of truth, Steve cannot add anymore because he's not an admin. Now, Jane seems more responsible, so let's go ahead and nominate Jane as an admin. And if I sign out and sign in as Jane, Jane can add a new task. But if I sign out and sign in as Steve again, Steve cannot add a new task, which is cool, but it's not a very good user experience. We want Steve not to be able to know that he could have added, because this gets him frustrated. Why am I not allowed to add? So let's head over to the UI. And what I want to do here is reuse the same single source of truth definition. So I'm going to highlight the form, and I'm going to say the task repo metadata only show this if insert is allowed. So that way, I'm reusing the same definition between the front end and the back end. And you can look here, if I'll go ahead and comment out API insert, he will see the form. And if I comment in back in, he will not see the form. Okay, so those are the ideas of single source of truth and how I can control everything through this single source of truth. Now, we have a little bit more time. Would you like to see this deployed to the cloud? Okay, so I'm going to try, but it works half the time, so be patient with me. I'm hoping that it will work. So to prepare it for deployment to the cloud, we need to do some adjustments. The most important one is to say here that the connection string comes from the database URL variable. That's the cloud provider will tell us the connection string of the Postgres database there. And the next thing I'm going to do here is also use the same Node.js server to return the static React file. I don't have to do that, but in this simple scenario, it works well. So I'm going to add that code that basically grabs whatever is in dist and returns it to the browser and also gets the port from the provider. So once we've done all of that, let's go ahead and try to deploy. I'm going to deploy to Railway. They used to be free until 2 weeks ago. Now they are $5 a month, but it's still pretty okay. So I'm going to say Railway init, and it will initialize my project, and I'll say we are developers. Hopefully that would work. And then I say Railway open to open the management of Railway. Here I'll define that I want to have a database Postgres and that I want to have an empty service. And after it sets them up, I'm going to ask him to define an environment variable for my database URL. So we have that. And I'm going to ask it to define a domain so we can actually navigate to it. And then I'll say over here, Railway app. Railway app will copy the code that I have here, upload it to Railway. It will run npm I to install whatever it needs. It's going to run npm build to build whatever it needs, and eventually npm start to run whatever I need. Okay, now while it's doing that, I'm going to hope that it will work and head back to our PowerPoint presentation. And let's talk a little bit more. So Remalt fits within your existing stack. It works with any front end. We can use it with React, Vue, Svelte, Angular, Quick, Vanilla, Solid, anything you like. It works with any backends that you use today. So you can use it with Express, with Festify, with Nest, or with Next, Nuxt, SvelteKit, anything that you use. It works with almost any database, so MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, but even older databases such as SQL Server or, God forbid, Oracle. And there's also, it works on any server or serverless runtimes that runs Node.js. So I can run it on a full Node.js server or on an edge function such as Vercel or Amazon Lambda. It works on all. There's also a lot more to Remalt than we have time to show in this short presentation. Imagine that you can leverage that single source of truth to pretty much anything. So if I want to get GraphQL, why not? You can use the same definition and expose the GraphQL API or expose an open API outlet for it. Pretty much anything that you can imagine, you can extend that single source of truth to give it to you. Of course, there's also a relationship between entities, fields that are only existing on the server but never sent to the client. If you hate decorators, that's okay. You can work without decorators. And if you're not using TypeScript, I pity you, but you are okay to use JavaScript as well. It works with JS stocks just as well. So this is our website, and you are welcome to come and visit and play with it. We have a very active Discord channel, and there are tutorials on our website that uses React, Angular, Vue, and Next that do everything that I've done here today in about 2 hours. We even have YouTube videos for that. And I'm gonna stop all of you from copying because I want to see if my deployment worked. So yes, it did. So here we are. We are now deployed to the cloud, and I need you all to help me. So I'm gonna sign in as Jane, and I'm gonna add a task, give Remalt a spin, and then I'm gonna share this and ask you all, don't go, and ask you all to read this QR code, sign in as Jane, and let's see if it adds tasks on the browser. And while you all do that, I'm going to grab a picture so I will know that I was here. Cool. I still have more 5 minutes. That's great. I'm almost done. Cool. Perfect. So that's what I have to show you guys today. And I hope you enjoyed this. Let me switch back here. Just want to share a little bit that this already runs in production for quite a while. And currently, one of the projects that I had the privilege of working on is a volunteer food delivery application that I've written, and currently serves 400,000 food deliveries a year to people in need from food banks. And it runs on a Heroku server that cost me $16 a month. Okay, so it scales extremely well. And of course, it's been inspected for security and cybersecurity because, you know, we need to help people. And it's been used in production for a while by multiple companies, and I invite you all to take it for a spin and reach out to me. I'm available. And all of you have stickers that I'm going to put it over here afterwards, and I would love it if you'll take it and put it on anything. So this is a good time for Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was the fastest full stack app I have seen in my life. Basically, for Q&As, if you have still time, you can still ask some questions because you have answered like all of them except for one with that previous slide of you.
Okay.
So there was one about Nest.js, one about MongoDB, but those are covered.
Both work, yeah.
And there is a question, which countries do you have offices in?
So this is an open source project, okay, that doesn't have any offices. We have a few contributors that develop in it. We are based in Israel. And you are all welcome to join it and contribute in any way. You know, creating issues is a great contribution. Writing docs or writing blog articles or videos, that's amazing. We love that the most. And feel free to join the community and contribute. We love that.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for your attention.